She was left by her own daughter at the trading post. Until a poor cowboy gave her hope again. The morning air at the trading post was cool and quiet. A pale sun rested low in the sky, casting soft light over the dusty road that stretched far into the distance. Wooden wheels had carved deep lines into the ground over many years, and the wind carried the smell of dry earth and old wood. A small bell above the trading post door rang as an old woman stepped inside, holding a worn cloth bag close to her chest. She was not alone. Her daughter walked beside her, moving quickly, her boots tapping on the wooden floor. The daughter's face showed little emotion, only a look of hurry, as if she had many places to be and no time to stay. The old woman's steps were slow, careful, and unsure. Her eyes moved around the room, taking in the shelves filled with simple goods, sacks of grain, and jars of dried food. This place felt strange to her, but she tried to believe it was only a stop along the way. The trading post owner stood behind the counter polishing a metal cup with a clean cloth. He looked up and gave a small nod, the kind given to travelers who passed through often. The daughter spoke first, her voice short and firm. She asked for water and a place for her mother to sit. The owner pointed to a long wooden bench near the wall, worn smooth by many years of waiting travelers. The old woman sat down slowly. The bench felt cold through her thin dress, but she did not complain. She placed her bag beside her and folded her hands in her lap. She looked up at her daughter, searching her face for warmth, for comfort, for any sign that she was still wanted. The daughter avoided her eyes. "I'll be back soon," the daughter said. Her voice sounded steady, but there was a sharp edge to it. She turned toward the door without waiting for a reply. The old woman opened her mouth to speak, but the words did not come out. The bell rang again as the door closed behind her daughter. The sound echoed in the room and then faded into silence. At first, the old woman believed her daughter would return. She told herself it was just a short trip, maybe to trade something or speak to someone outside. She leaned back against the wall and watched the doorway. Her heart beat slowly, patiently. Time moved on. The sun rose higher, and light filled the trading post. A man with a cart stopped to buy supplies. A woman carrying a basket came in to trade eggs for flour. Each time the door opened, the old woman lifted her head, her eyes filled with hope. Each time, it was not her daughter. The trading post owner noticed her waiting. He brought her a cup of water and placed it gently beside her. She thanked him with a small smile, her voice soft and tired. He asked if she was all right. She nodded, even though her heart felt heavy. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying dust across the road. The old woman watched through the window as shadows moved across the ground. Her hands began to shake slightly, and she wrapped them around the cup to keep them still. She whispered her daughter's name under her breath, like a quiet prayer. Hours passed. The sun began to lean toward the west, and the warmth of the day faded. The old woman's hope started to weaken, like a candle running out of wax. She stood up slowly and walked to the door. She stepped outside and looked down the long road. There was no sign of her daughter, only empty land and a sky that seemed too wide and too quiet. She returned to the bench and sat down again, her shoulders slumping. The trading post owner watched her from behind the counter. He had seen many travelers come and go, but something about this woman's stillness and waiting made him uneasy. "Are you sure she's coming back?" he asked gently. The old woman hesitated. Her eyes dropped to the floor. She did not want to say the words out loud because saying them would make them real. She finally shook her head, just a little. "I don't know," she said. Her voice cracked and she cleared her throat. She said she would. The owner nodded slowly. He did not push her for more. He knew some answers had to come on their own. As evening approached, the sky turned shades of orange and pink. The light made the wooden walls glow softly. The old woman hugged her bag closer to her chest. Inside were a few small items from her past, things that reminded her of better days. She touched the bag as if it could protect her from the growing feeling of being truly alone. Her mind drifted back to earlier times. She remembered when her daughter was young, running through fields, laughing freely. She remembered holding her small hand, promising to always be there. She wondered when things had changed, when the distance had grown between them like a river too wide to cross. A group of riders passed by outside, their voices loud and full of life. The old woman listened to them fade into the distance. She felt like she was fading too, becoming part of the quiet background of the trading post, just another shadow on the wall. The trading post owner closed the door as night fell. He lit a small lantern and its soft light filled the room. He brought the old woman a simple bowl of soup and placed it in her hands. She thanked him again, her eyes shining with tears she tried hard to hold back. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "It's not much, but it's warm." The old woman nodded, unable to speak for a moment. She took a small sip of the soup. The warmth spread through her, not just in her body, but in her heart. Someone still cared, even if her own daughter had not returned. Later, as she lay on a thin blanket near the wall, she stared up at the wooden ceiling. The lantern light flickered, casting gentle shadows. She listened to the sounds of the night, the wind outside, the quiet breathing of the trading post owner in another room. Her thoughts moved between sadness and a small, fragile hope. She did not know what the next day would bring. She did not know where she would go or who would stand beside her. But she told herself she would not give up. She had lived through many hard days before, and she would find a way to live through this one too. As sleep slowly came, the image of her daughter faded from her mind. In its place, she held on to the simple kindness of a stranger who had offered her water, soup, and a place to rest. It was not much, but it was enough to keep her heart from breaking completely. Outside, the stars appeared one by one in the dark sky, shining quietly over the trading post and the lonely road. The old woman rested, not knowing that this place, where she had been left behind, would soon become the start of a new chapter in her life. The morning air was cool, and the trading post felt quiet again. The old woman sat on the same wooden bench, her hands wrapped tightly around the thin blanket she had been given. The memory of the day before, when her daughter had left her behind, still weighed heavily on her heart. She tried not to think about it, but the silence of the post made it impossible. Each time the door opened, she lifted her head, hoping to see her daughter return. Each time she was disappointed. Then the bell rang once more. The door opened and a young cowboy stepped inside. His hat was dusty, his boots worn, and the horse tied outside looked tired and hungry. The cowboy's clothes were simple, patched in several places, and he carried no more than what was needed for himself. There was a kind expression on his face, gentle and careful, as if he noticed everything around him. When he saw the old woman sitting alone, something seemed to pull at him. He approached her slowly. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked. His voice was calm and respectful. The old woman looked up, surprised. She had been so used to being alone that someone asking about her felt almost foreign. I'm fine," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. She looked away, afraid of revealing how empty she felt inside. The cowboy did not push. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small piece of bread and a bit of dried meat.
He handed it to her. "Here."
"Eat something. You've been waiting long, I can tell." The old woman shook her head at first. She had never been used to receiving kindness from strangers. But the smell of the food and the warmth in the cowboy's eyes made her hesitate. Slowly, she accepted it and took a small bite. The taste was simple, but it felt comforting. She realized for the first time in a long while that someone cared enough to notice her suffering. The cowboy sat down beside her, careful to leave enough space. He spoke in soft tones, sharing small stories about his life on the open road. He told her how he worked from dawn until dusk, riding from town to town, delivering messages and goods. He spoke about his horse, about the storms he had endured, and about the nights he had spent under the stars. The old woman listened quietly, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. She had been alone for so long that even simple conversation felt like a gift. When he finished a story, she shared a little about herself, her voice low at first, then growing stronger. She told him about her daughter, about how she had been left behind, and how she had waited all day hoping to be taken back home. The cowboy listened without judgment. He nodded and occasionally offered a comforting word, never interrupting, never seeming impatient. He understood that she had been hurt, that her heart was heavy with sorrow. And though he had little himself, he chose to give what he could: time, attention, and small acts of kindness. After a while, the trading post owner brought them a small kettle of tea. The old woman sipped carefully, feeling the warmth spread through her body. The cowboy smiled and offered her a cup, though his own hands were rough and tired. They sat together in silence for a few minutes, watching the sun rise higher in the sky. The light fell through the wooden beams, casting soft patterns on the floor, making the moment feel gentle and peaceful. "I don't have much," the cowboy said finally, "but I can check on you. Come by when you can, and I'll bring something to eat." His words were simple, but they carried a promise. The old woman looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. She wanted to believe, but fear and doubt held her back. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. The cowboy shrugged, then smiled. "Because everyone needs a little hope sometimes. And right now, you need it more than I do." His honesty was quiet, yet it struck her deeply. She realized she had not felt this cared for in many years, not even by her own family. Over the next few days, the cowboy returned often. Sometimes he brought food, sometimes he simply sat and talked. He shared stories of travelers he had met, of kind strangers and honest work, of days when everything seemed hopeless but turned out better than expected. The old woman began to look forward to these visits. She even smiled again, though the sadness of being abandoned never fully left her. Other visitors came and went at the trading post. Merchants, farmers, and travelers crossed the wooden floor with baskets, wagons, and packages. Some glanced at the old woman, curious about her presence. Others paid no attention. But the cowboy always stayed with her. He would introduce her as someone worth knowing, someone with a gentle heart. Slowly, the other visitors began to see her as more than just an old woman sitting quietly. One afternoon, a storm rolled in. Dark clouds stretched across the sky, and the wind whipped dust along the road. Travelers hurried to find shelter. The old woman shivered as the temperature dropped. The cowboy tied his horse securely and helped her inside, bringing her to a small corner of the trading post where she could be safe and dry. He covered her with a blanket and encouraged her to stay warm. "I'll be back in a little while," he said. "Don't worry." And he returned, just as he promised, with a small lantern and a hot meal. They sat together listening to the rain tapping on the roof. The warmth of the food, the safety of the shelter, and the presence of someone who truly cared began to heal the cracks in the old woman's heart. She realized that hope was no longer a distant dream. It could be here, even in small pieces. Days turned into a week. The old woman and the cowboy developed a quiet rhythm. She would tend to small chores around the trading post, and he would check in with food, news, or simply company. The loneliness that had been her constant companion began to loosen its grip. The old woman discovered that hope was contagious. One small act of kindness had grown into a bond that neither of them had expected. Through it all, the old woman remembered her daughter. She thought about the day she had been left behind and the pain of being forgotten. Yet she no longer felt powerless. With the cowboy's support, she started to believe that life could hold something good again. She could not undo the past, but she could move forward with the small comforts, laughter, and shared stories that now filled her days. The cowboy never demanded anything from her. He never judged her for her sorrow. He simply showed up. And that simple presence, steady and kind, became more valuable than anything else in the old woman's life. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in pink and orange, the cowboy and the old woman sat outside the trading post. The wind was gentle and the air smelled of earth and rain. She looked at him and realized that she was no longer entirely alone. She had someone who cared, someone who saw her as a person, not just a shadow waiting to be forgotten. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "You don't have to," he replied. "Just live. Keep moving forward. That's all I ask." She nodded. For the first time in many days, she felt a quiet happiness. It was not loud or bright, but it was steady, like a small flame that refused to go out. And in that moment, she realized that even in the face of being abandoned, life could offer another chance. A chance for hope, for kindness, and for connection. The cowboy stayed until nightfall, ensuring that she was comfortable. As he walked to his horse, he looked back and smiled. The old woman waved, a small but genuine gesture. She went to bed that night with a heart that felt lighter than it had in years. She did not know what the next days would bring, but she was ready to face them, knowing that someone believed in her. From that day forward, the trading post became more than a stop along the road. It became a place of new beginnings. And at the center of it, an old woman who had once been left behind began to learn that hope could grow, even from the smallest acts of care, and that life could still surprise her with moments of warmth and friendship she never expected. The days at the trading post settled into a quiet rhythm. The old woman had begun to feel more like part of the place than just a visitor waiting to be forgotten. The warmth from the lanterns at night and the gentle wind through the open windows during the day no longer felt lonely. She had a small corner to call her own, with a thin blanket and a small stool, and she tended to simple chores, sweeping the floor, arranging goods, and cleaning the windows. Each act gave her a sense of purpose, and each task reminded her that she was still capable, still needed, even if only in small ways. The cowboy came nearly every day. Sometimes he brought food, sometimes just conversation. But he never came empty-handed. One morning he arrived with a small loaf of bread still warm from the bakery in the next town. "I thought you might like it fresh," he said, placing it gently in front of her. The old woman looked at him with surprise, then with a small smile. She could feel his thoughtfulness in every gesture, no matter how simple. "You didn't have to," she said softly. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to. You've been through a lot. It's nice to see you smile again." That day, the old woman decided to try something she had not done in years. She helped the trading post owner organize some of the shelves, dusting, arranging jars, sweeping the floor. It was simple work, but it gave her a sense of pride. She noticed the way customers glanced at her now, with curiosity and even respect. One traveler, a young mother, stopped and thanked her for helping keep things tidy. The old woman felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the sun. Evenings became times of quiet reflection. After her chores, she would sit by the window and watch the sunset behind the hills. She had learned to enjoy the colors, the soft oranges, pinks, and purples that stretched across the sky. It reminded her that even after days filled with worry and pain, there was still beauty to be found. One particularly cool morning, the cowboy brought a small blanket for her chair. "It's not much," he said, "but it'll keep you warmer while you work." She wrapped it around her shoulders and smiled. The blanket smelled faintly of leather and fresh hay, a smell that reminded her of the open fields and the road he traveled. She realized that these small acts of care had begun to fill a space inside her heart that had been empty for so long. As the days passed, she noticed that her hands no longer shook when she worked. Her movements were steadier, her steps more confident. She started to greet the other travelers who came into the trading post, offering help when she could. A quiet confidence began to grow in her, one that had nothing to do with her daughter or her past, but was built from the kindness of those around her. The cowboy noticed these changes as well. One afternoon, as he helped load a wagon outside, he glanced back at the old woman who was carefully sweeping the floor. He smiled. She looked up, noticed him watching, and waved. There was no awkwardness, no need for words. In the simple gesture of acknowledgement, a bond had grown strong between them. It was during these small, everyday moments that the old woman began to see the true meaning of family, not the people who leave you behind, but the ones who choose to stay. The trading post owner, too, became part of her quiet life. He never forced conversation, but always offered a kind smile, a word of encouragement, or a cup of tea. She realized that family could be built from respect, kindness, and shared presence. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills and cast long shadows across the wooden floor, a group of riders arrived at the trading post. They were merchants traveling from a distant town, tired and dusty from their journey. The old woman went to help, carrying small parcels to the counter and arranging items for the visitors. The merchants noticed her gentle manner, the care she took in her work, and complimented her on her helpfulness. The old woman felt a quiet pride. She realized she was no longer just someone left behind. She was becoming a person others could count on. The cowboy arrived soon after, tying his horse outside. He noticed the old woman's slight smile as she handed items to the merchants. He nodded approvingly. "See? You're already making a difference," he said quietly. She laughed softly, feeling warmth in her chest that had little to do with the sun. That night, after the visitors had left, the old woman sat by the window, sipping tea, and reflected on how far she had come. Only a week ago she had felt abandoned, hopeless, and invisible. Now she had a place to stay, work to keep her occupied, and people who genuinely cared. She realized that life could be rebuilt, piece by piece, through small acts of kindness, trust, and daily courage. One morning, as she was arranging some goods near the counter, the cowboy arrived with a bundle wrapped in cloth. "I thought you could use this," he said. She carefully unwrapped it to find a small, handcrafted basket. It was simple, but it was made with care. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise and gratitude. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just know that someone cares." That day, as the wind moved gently outside, she felt a sense of belonging she had not known for years. The basket, the blanket, the bread, and the conversations, all of it was a reminder that hope could grow, even in the darkest moments. She began to see the trading post not just as a stop along the road, but as a place where she could rebuild her life. As the days passed, more visitors noticed her presence. She helped children find candies, offered water to travelers, and even shared small stories of her past with those who would listen. Each interaction brought her confidence back a little more. She realized that giving to others, even in small ways, gave her a sense of purpose she had lost when she had been abandoned. One afternoon, the cowboy found her sitting outside, watching the clouds move across the sky. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. "Yes," she replied softly. "It's peaceful here." "It suits you," he said with a smile. "You've grown stronger these past days." The old woman looked at him, unsure of how to respond. She had been broken, but now she was slowly healing. The words of the cowboy, simple and kind, reminded her that strength was not measured by what had been lost, but by how she continued to move forward. That night, as the lanterns were lit and the post became quiet, she wrote a small note. It was not for anyone else, only for herself. "I am not forgotten. I am still here. I can still matter." She placed it carefully in her bag and smiled. For the first time in a long while, she felt a quiet peace. She had discovered that life could still offer kindness, that people could still care, and that even after being left behind, it was possible to begin again. The old woman realized that the trading post, the cowboy, and even the small routines of her day had become a shelter for her spirit. She was learning to trust again, not blindly, but carefully, and with each act of care, her hope grew stronger. She was no longer only waiting for her daughter to return. She was building a life she could live fully, even in the absence of those who had abandoned her. And so, the days passed, each one filled with small moments of joy and connection. She learned that strength could be quiet and steady, that hope could rise from small acts of kindness, and that even in the face of betrayal, life could still offer light and warmth. The old woman began to understand that the cowboy's presence had given her more than food or comfort. He had given her something much greater, the courage to believe in herself and the possibility of new beginnings. By the time the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, the old woman no longer felt the heavy weight of loneliness. She had a place where she was valued, someone who cared for her, and the knowledge that each day could bring new hope. The cowboy rode off into the distance, promising to return in the morning, leaving her with a quiet smile and a heart slowly learning to trust again. The trading post had become more than a building filled with goods. It had become a place of safety, of growth, and of possibility. And in the center of it all, an old woman who had once been abandoned was learning to live again, piece by piece, day by day. The trading post had grown quieter in the early morning, with only the soft sound of the wind and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. The old woman sat by the window, her hands busy folding a small cloth she used for cleaning. The sunlight spilled through the open shutters, casting warm lines across the wooden floor. She had grown used to the quiet, and it had become a comfort, a gentle rhythm in her days. As she worked, she noticed movement outside. A carriage approached slowly along the dusty road, its wheels leaving deep tracks in the earth. At first, she thought it was just another traveler, but as it drew closer, her heart skipped a beat. A familiar figure stepped down from the carriage, a young woman dressed in fine clothes, her boots polished and her hair carefully arranged. The old woman froze, her hands clutching the cloth tightly. Her daughter had returned. For a moment, neither spoke. The daughter's eyes, bright and full of purpose, met her mother's. There was a hesitancy in her step, as if she feared the response she might receive. The old woman's chest tightened. The years of abandonment, the hurt of being left behind, and the quiet hope she had built with the cowboy all surged to the surface. I've come back, the daughter said finally. Her voice was soft but carried an urgency. I am ready now. I want you to come with me. The old woman looked at her, trying to read the expression on her face. She saw determination, yes, but she also saw the same coldness that had caused her pain. She remembered the day she had been left at the trading post, the long hours of waiting, and the quiet despair that had filled her heart. Anger, sorrow, and confusion welled up inside her. I don't know if I can, the old woman whispered. Her voice trembled. After what happened? After you left me. The daughter stepped closer, reaching out as if to bridge the gap between them. Mother, please, she pleaded. I had reasons. I thought I was helping. The old woman shook her head. I waited day after day, she said. I sat here hoping you would return, and yet you never came. I thought I had nothing, and I believed I was forgotten. Tears formed in her eyes, and the daughter's own face softened with regret. She took a hesitant step closer, but the old woman stood, holding her ground. The trading post owner, who had been quietly watching from behind the counter, understood the weight of the moment. He had seen many difficult reunions, but this one felt fragile, delicate, and raw. The cowboy, who had been working on a wagon outside, now appeared in the doorway. He paused, sensing the tension, and quietly stepped aside. He did not speak, only watched, understanding that this was a moment the old woman needed to face on her own. The daughter's eyes welled with tears. I've changed, she said. I am ready to take care of you now. Please, let me make it right. The old woman's gaze softened slightly, but the anger and sorrow were still there. It's not that simple, she said. You left me alone when I needed you the most. And now I have found something here. People who care about me. I am not helpless anymore. The daughter hesitated, the weight of the truth settling over her. She had come back expecting to be welcomed, but she now realized that her mother's life had moved forward without her. The old woman had built her own strength, her own hope, and her own small world. The trading post owner cleared his throat gently. "Sometimes family is more than blood," he said softly. "It's the people who stand by you when no one else does." The old woman looked at him, then at the cowboy standing quietly in the doorway. His presence reminded her of the care and patience she had received, the small acts that had rebuilt her spirit. She realized that these people had become her family in a way her daughter could not replace. I am grateful you came back," she said finally, "but I must decide what is right for me." Her voice was firm, steady, and full of the confidence she had regained over the past weeks. The daughter nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I understand," she whispered. I hoped I could fix things." "You cannot fix what you ignored for so long," the old woman replied. "I cannot undo the hurt, and I cannot pretend it did not happen. I have learned to survive, to care for myself, and to find hope in small acts of kindness. I cannot leave that behind now." For a moment the trading post was quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if listening to the words that hung between mother and daughter. The daughter's shoulders slumped. She understood finally that her mother had grown stronger without her. She had been left behind, yes, but she had not been broken. I am sorry," the daughter said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I will leave you to your life." The old woman nodded. She felt a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. The chapter with her daughter had closed, not with anger or revenge, but with understanding. She had survived abandonment and found her own strength. Now, she could choose the life she wanted to live. The cowboy stepped forward quietly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone," he said. "You have people who care, and you have built your own life here. That is something no one can take away." The old woman smiled faintly, feeling the truth in his words. Her heart was no longer completely burdened by the past. She had faced it, acknowledged it, and now had the power to move forward. The daughter gathered her belongings, giving her mother a final hesitant look. I hope you find happiness," she said. "I will," the old woman replied, her voice calm. "I already have." As the daughter left, the trading post felt lighter, almost as if the air had shifted. The old woman returned to her chores, folding cloths and arranging goods, but now with a sense of peace and purpose. She realized that true family was not always the people we are born to, but the ones who choose to stay, who choose to care, and who help us rebuild our hearts when life has tried to break us. That evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, the old woman and the cowboy sat outside watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The warmth of the setting sun touched their faces, and for a moment everything felt simple and right. "You handled that well," the cowboy said quietly, breaking the silence. "It would have been easy to let anger take over, but you stayed calm, honest, and strong." The old woman nodded. "It was hard," she admitted, "but I had to make a choice. I cannot live in the past, and I cannot give my power to someone who abandoned me. I can only live in the present, with the people who care for me now." The cowboy smiled, understanding the depth of her words. "You have built something beautiful here," he said. "A life worth protecting. A life worth living." The old woman looked at him, her eyes shining in the soft light of dusk. She realized he was right. The trading post, the kindness of strangers, and the small routines she had grown to love had become her world. She did not need to return to a life where she'd been left behind. She had learned that she could survive and even thrive with hope, care, and courage. Night fell and the stars appeared one by one in the sky. The old woman walked to the window, looking out at the quiet road. She thought of her daughter once more, not with anger, but with understanding. People sometimes make choices that hurt others, and sometimes we cannot control those choices. What mattered now was the life she was building, the hope she was nurturing, and the family she had chosen. The cowboy remained nearby, tending to his horse, but he did not intrude. The old woman felt safe, protected, and seen. She realized that while her daughter had returned to try to claim her, the true home she needed was not in the past. It was here, in the present, with people who stood by her. As she prepared for sleep that night, she felt a quiet confidence. She had faced abandonment, sorrow, and the difficult choice of letting go of the past. Now, she could rest knowing she had the strength to protect herself, the courage to move forward, and the understanding that life could still offer kindness, care, and new beginnings. The trading post, with its warm light, gentle wind, and steady routine, had become more than a place to wait. It had become a home, a sanctuary, and a place where hope could flourish again. And at the center of it all, the old woman who had once been abandoned stood strong, ready to embrace the days ahead, no longer waiting for anyone else to decide her fate. The sun rose slowly over the trading post, painting the sky with soft shades of gold and pink. The old woman awoke on her thin blanket, stretching her arms gently and listening to the quiet sounds of the morning. Birds chirped outside, and the faint creak of the door in the breeze reminded her that life, as always, moved forward. She rose and folded her blanket neatly, placing it in her small corner. The trading post had become more than a shelter. It had become a home, a place of warmth, care, and quiet purpose. Over the past days, she had learned to find joy in small tasks, arranging goods, helping travelers, and tidying the floors. These small acts no longer felt like chores. They felt like contributions to something meaningful. She was part of a rhythm, part of a life that mattered. The door swung open and the bell above it rang softly. The cowboy stepped inside, his boots making a quiet sound on the wooden floor. He had arrived early, just as he had promised the previous day. His horse was tied outside, patiently waiting, and his eyes carried a soft smile as he looked at her. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentle. "I brought something for breakfast." The old woman smiled, feeling the warmth of his kindness. He had become more than a friend. He had become her anchor, a steady presence in a world that had once abandoned her. She felt safe in his company, and the small gestures of care he offered reminded her that she was valued, seen, and appreciated. They shared a quiet breakfast, sitting at the small counter of the trading post. The sunlight poured through the windows, filling the room with soft golden light. As they ate, travelers passed through the door, exchanging greetings and small smiles. The old woman realized how much her life had changed. Just days ago, she had been left alone, forgotten, and hopeless. Now, she had a place to belong, and people who genuinely cared for her well-being. Later that morning, the old woman moved to her usual chores, sweeping the floor and arranging goods on the shelves. The trading post owner watched her with a quiet satisfaction, understanding how much she had grown in just a short time. Her confidence, once fragile, had begun to shine through. She moved with purpose, her hands steady and her heart light. The door opened again, and a young traveler entered, looking tired and dusty from the road. The old woman approached with a kind smile, offering water and a place to rest. The traveler thanked her warmly, noticing her gentle nature and helpful presence. For the first time in many years, the old woman felt that her actions mattered, not because she was forced to act, but because she wanted to. She realized that her life was no longer defined by those who had left her behind. She could define it herself, with courage, kindness, and hope. In the late afternoon, the cowboy returned from a short trip. He carried with him a small bundle, wrapped carefully in cloth. He handed it to the old woman with a smile. Inside was a small hand-carved wooden box, simple and beautiful. "I made this for you," he said softly, "to remind you that you are not alone and that you are valued." The old woman touched the box with gentle hands, feeling the smooth curves of the wood. A quiet emotion filled her chest, a mix of gratitude, warmth, and the understanding that she had found a new family here. She looked up at the cowboy, her eyes bright. "Thank you," she whispered. "More than I can say." Evening fell, and the trading post glowed softly in the light of lanterns. The old woman and the cowboy sat outside, watching the sun set behind the hills. The colors of the sky shifted from gold to soft pinks and purples, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the scent of earth and grass. For a long moment they simply sat together, in quiet companionship. The old woman reflected on all that had happened, the pain of being left behind, the slow rebuilding of hope, and the small acts of kindness that had carried her through. She realized that life had offered her a second chance, not through those who abandoned her, but through those who chose to stay. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she said quietly. "After everything, I thought I would always be alone." The cowboy looked at her with gentle eyes. "You're never truly alone," he said. "Family isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people who care for you, who stand by you, who help you find hope again." The old woman nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She thought about her daughter briefly, not with anger but with acceptance. Some chapters close so that others can open. She had learned to let go of the past, to cherish the present, and to embrace the future with an open heart. Over the next days, the old woman's life continued with the same quiet rhythm. She greeted travelers, helped the trading post owner, and shared small acts of kindness with those who stopped along the road. Each day brought new smiles, small conversations, and moments of joy. Her heart, once heavy with abandonment, felt lighter. She no longer waited for anyone to return or validate her worth. She had built her own happiness. One afternoon, a traveler asked her about her story. Curious about the strength and gentleness she seemed to carry, she told a portion of it, carefully choosing her words. She spoke of hardship, loneliness, and the pain of being left behind, but she also spoke of hope, courage, and the kindness of those who had stayed. The traveler listened in awe, realizing that the old woman had survived what many could not. Her story was one of resilience and quiet triumph. As night fell once more, the old woman sat by the window, looking at the stars that appeared one by one. The trading post was quiet, filled only with the gentle creak of wood and the soft hum of the wind. She reflected on how far she had come, from despair to hope, from loneliness to connection, from being abandoned to finding a chosen family. The cowboy stepped into the doorway, carrying a lantern. He offered a warm smile, which she returned. Together they walked outside, looking at the stars and the peaceful road stretching into the distance. The old woman felt a quiet happiness, one that had nothing to do with anyone leaving or returning, and everything to do with the life she had built. She realized that life's most valuable treasures were not always in grand gestures or promises, but in small acts of care, understanding, and presence. The bread shared, the blanket offered, the kind words spoken, they had become the foundation of her new life. She had been left behind once, but now she was standing strong, surrounded by people who loved her and cared for her, in a place that felt like home. Days turned into weeks, and the trading post became a place of warmth, laughter, and quiet life. Travelers came and went, but the old woman's presence became a comforting constant. The cowboy continued to visit, sharing stories and small gifts, never asking for anything in return. The trading post owner treated her as part of the family he had never had time to build. And the old woman, once abandoned, finally understood what it meant to belong. She no longer feared being alone. She no longer waited for someone who had hurt her to return. Instead, she embraced the people who had stayed, the moments that brought her joy, and the hope that each day offered. Her life, once fragile and uncertain, had grown steady, full of meaning, and alive with possibilities. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in soft purples and pinks, the old woman stood outside the trading post. She breathed in the fresh air, feeling the earth beneath her feet and the wind in her hair. She thought about the journey she had taken, from the pain of abandonment to the slow, steady rebuilding of hope. She smiled, knowing that life had given her a second chance, one she would cherish fully. The cowboy joined her, and together they watched the horizon. She realized that happiness was not about waiting for the past to change. It was about living in the present, building connections, and finding those who truly cared. And in that moment, she knew she had found what she had been searching for all along, a life of peace, love, and belonging. As the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, the old woman felt a quiet, steady joy. She had been left behind, yes, but she had also been found, by kindness, by friendship, and by the strength she discovered within herself. She had chosen her family, her home, and her happiness, and she knew that no one could take that away. The trading post, once a place of waiting and uncertainty, had become a sanctuary, and at the center of it, the old woman who had faced abandonment now stood strong, full of hope and ready to embrace all the days yet to come. She was no longer waiting for anyone. She had found her life, her family, and her peace.